have Mark Blundell with us. Mark is a former Formula 1, IndyCar and Le Mans driver who moved on to TV and now is a successful businessman. So Mark, thanks very much for joining us today. Start at the very beginning. How did you get into Formula 1?
Oh, how did I get into F1? Like anybody in any job, started at the bottom and worked my way up. So as a youngster, got into the world of motorsport at 17 years old, which is quite late in comparison to many, and started at the bottom rung of the ladder in Formula Ford 1600, which was the sort of entry level into single-seater motorsport in the UK and pretty much around the world. And that was 1984. And by 1989, I was sitting in a Formula 1 car and testing for the Williams Grand Prix team.
Okay, wow.
So a quick transition, back in those days especially.
It wasn't a family thing? There was no history of...
No heritage, no family sort of association, based off of... Yes, there was a link because my father was in the second-hand car business.
Right, okay.
So as a youngster, as a kid at 8 years old, I was sitting on a cushion and driving around in the backyard. And I think by 9 years old, I was already crashing cars. So I got that in the system quick.
Yeah.
So not any link to motorsport. Cars, yes, loved them. I was one of those kids who'd sit in the back seats and would tell the rear lights of a car on the motorway from 2 miles away. I knew everything about cars. So that's the sort of passionate side of it that came through. But the actual link to motorsport, there wasn't any whatsoever. So it was driven really off the back of a friend of my dad's who basically said, look, why don't you come along to a race one weekend and just see what you think? And from there, it was like, oh, this is really cool.
So I take it, Mark, it was just progression through the ranks, as it were, of the driving setup and your ability. You're good enough for Formula 1, for F1. What was your first team?
Oh, so I went to first team in terms of contractually. I was actually with Williams as the test and reserve driver.
Right.
But then doing all of that work, sort of in that reserve role, was sort of showing my wares down pit lane, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I got picked up by the Brabham Formula 1 team, which is no longer now, but back in those days was quite a big name. Not the heady heights what Brabham were, which is unfortunate for us. But that was contractually the first deal that I had as a Grand Prix driver. That was 1991.
Right.
And my teammate was a guy called Martin Brundle.
Oh, right, okay.
So there you go. There's already the confusion that came in between Blundell, Brundle, Martin, Mark. We come from the same neck of the woods in the UK. Most people today will know Martin as, probably the best motorsport, but even maybe sports commentator in the world. I mean, he's fantastic at his job, so he does a great job. But so 1991 was the start of my Grand Prix career.
Right. How did you find it? I mean, I'm comparing it to modern day F1, Lewis Hamilton and all of that. What was the difference then? Formula 1 drivers, was it more was it a technology based, a half and half, or what was that about?
Well, I mean, F1's always been the pinnacle of technology. Yeah, that's what it stands for in terms of evolution and development, progress. Things that were driving around on our roads today were probably developed in F1 7 or 8 years ago. That's really where it is. And tyre technology, for example, most of the tyre technology is driven off the back of F1 development, which is great for us when being in the car on the road and being a lot safer. But it's not the same. There's a lot of differences. The world of media, for a start. We have a 24/7 TV channel now on F1 in the UK. Social media,
which you didn't have back in the...
Didn't have any of that back then. So the awareness factor was not anywhere near the heights that it is today. The bigger thing back then as well was actually 1991. We were pre-qualified to qualify because there were basically 34 cars. So there was already guys who were going to get knocked out by 8:30 on a Friday morning to even arrive into the qualifying session, let alone get to the Grand Prix.
Right.
Today we're looking at 20 guys maximum. So the grid has reduced significantly.
Right.
With that, some of the budgets have gone the other way. So Formula One now is topping out with maybe $450 million US for a big budget.
Right, okay.
So it's still sport, but it's business with a big capital B at the front of it. I mean, it really is a global business.
But you touched on a point there about the drivers and the 20 guys competing on the grid. In those days, it was more of a driver-led race, wasn't it? I mean, the technology, etc. It was a duel. It was a one against one.
Well, I would say the drivers had more influence in the outcome behind the wheel, because the human input was still a bigger percentage than what it is today. You know, and not by much in some ways, but I would say probably back in my day, and I hate saying that expression, but back in my day, it was probably like 70-30, so 70% the car, 30% the driver.
Right.
I would say now there's a good solid 10%. It's gone further on than that, and it's now 80% the car, 20% the driver. Mm-hmm. And you have to also think about it like, you know, we were driving with a conventional gearbox with 4 or 5-speed gears, H pattern, and every gear shift was a human input, and it would be like 0.2 of a second, and you would make a missed shift, and that would give an opportunity for a guy behind to try and get by, or you weren't very good at your job, and before you knew it, an hour in, you'd ruin the gearbox because you hadn't got the timing right. So it was an actual skill set to be able to do. I mean, it sounds crazy, but it's an actual skill set to change gear. When you bear in mind at Monaco, you're doing 1,700 gear changes in one Grand Prix. Yeah, you'd have a blister in your hand. You know, like it'd be an effort. Today, we're talking about the drivers pulling a paddle on the back of the steering wheel, and that shift is now down to about 20 milliseconds. And also, if it goes wrong, there's a backup system that will then make sure that it engages again, and it's still only 40 milliseconds.
Right.
That's technology. That's progress. That's what's happened.
So, am I right in saying here that as time has gone on here, the input from the driver, the skill required from the driver, has become less and less? Whereas and even further back, it was more of a driver-led. There's real skill involved in it.
It's an interesting question, because I think actually, I'm not sure that the skills have reduced. I think actually they've changed. And I say that in that, you know, I couldn't compute today, sitting behind the wheel of a Grand Prix car, changing 25 buttons in front of me on the steering wheel, with maybe 500 permutations of, and going from one corner to the next, and I've changed the rear differential, and I've changed the performance of the braking split, and I've changed the engine mapping, and they're still doing 200 miles an hour. So I think they've become more engineering-led behind their wheel.
Right.
And that's where the change is. So I think the skill sets are still there in terms of, are they fantastic drivers? Yes. Are they superhuman in what they do? Without a doubt. Are they actually now pretty switched on genius engineers? Also, yes.
And that element added to it as well. You still have to be able to or still have that ability as a driver.
Yeah, but I think
to that level.
I think F1 drivers per se were always having a bit more bandwidth to do what they did anyway, because, you know, there's a lot of, I look at a lot of sports, and then I look at what, you know, the guys do, and they have to have a lot of information that they process, because they've got somebody coming in their ear telling them to do this, telling them to do that.
Yeah.
They got conditions that might be, you know, a couple of centimetres of rain on the road and very slippery. They've got no visibility. They're doing 180 miles an hour. They're trying to overtake somebody. They're doing a change on the steering wheel. They've got somebody breathing down the backside who wants to go by as well. So a huge amount of data that's getting poured in, and they're processing it and still doing their job. And I think for a sports person, you know, that's a big attribute. That's something that is, you know, pretty special.
Mentally and physically, I think it takes so much out of you. I mean, moving on from that here, you were involved and you were very successful in LeMans and IndyCar. What are the similarities and the differences between that and F1? Because each has its own separate skill and demand, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the purity of driving, the driving is the driving. I mean, you know, the easy bit, and it sounds a bit arrogant, but the easy bit is doing this. Right, For us, that was the easy bit. The hard bit was actually the
but
processing.
It's not driving down the high street here.
Well, yeah, no, on the track, you know, but the hard bit was actually And at F1, for example, the hard bit wasn't in the car, it was out the car. Because you had to be the motivator, the politician, the
as a driver.
Yeah. And that's more and more, today's world is more evident. Because if you can't get all of that team, pushing and driving forward for you to get the benefit, you're not doing your job properly. You are team leader. You've got to take it by the horns and lead it for a season. And that's why for me, somebody like Hamilton, I take my hat off to him because he's been able to do that for several years at the highest level. Any other sport.
He's actually motivating his.
Oh, without a doubt.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. You have to go and be part and parcel of it to see the energy that the drivers give off to actually drag everyone through, right. Especially when the times are low.
Right.
And you got to pick everybody up. Yes, there's a huge amount of people part and parcel of it. I'm not taking that away.
Yeah.
But Sunday afternoon, there's two people that sit there on the grid and it all sits on their shoulders. And they're the ones that still have to go and do what they do, but they're also the ones that come Monday, they're either celebrating or it's like, right, guys and girls, where did we go wrong?
Right.
And let me put the pressure in the system to say, why didn't that call get made?
Right, okay.
Or why didn't we do that on this development part?
Right.
Yeah. Because at the end of it all, that's the key driver.
Right.
It's driving on track, but it's also driving off track. And that's where I think a lot of young sports people, in whatever sport they're in, sometimes don't quite get, and that for me is where the 1% club comes in. Whatever sport, that's the differential.
The difference between good and being elite.
And yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I didn't realise that with your team, that you as the driver can be the difference between success and failure of the team. Because I thought, with the guys that change the tyres, etc., they do that. Whoever is driving, and they do it to the best of their ability. But you as a driver, have a real impact on that.
So I'll give you a good example at the moment where we are today. There's just been a new documentary launched about Michael Schumacher.
Yeah.
And I think actually it gives a good insight, not only to Michael behind the scenes of Michael, the non-racing driver, but also behind the scenes of understanding that, there was a guy that actually was incredibly switched on to put all of the right people in the right positions to get success.
So that was his choice. Is that the choice of the driver to do that?
So that's the level that we're talking about. That's the case of, I'm now going to Ferrari. Ferrari have not quite been where they need to be.
Right.
But through my relationships and through what I know I need, I'm going to start making, a couple of phone calls here to say, hey, Jean Todt, don't you think it would be good if you were the team manager or team principal of Ferrari? Because I know where your skill sets are. Ross Brawn, wouldn't it be great if you and me were at Ferrari and we could build something together and put the car and a team together that can develop and progress?
But does that change though, Mark, with success as a driver? For example, Lewis Hamilton, world champion, he's at the top of the tree, and the influence he has on the team, as opposed to someone just coming in their first year in Formula One. Surely that ability to dictate who's in the team.
Yeah, there is that, but you also have to earn your stripes, and when you earn them, then you go and then use them. So, there's several personnel moves down pit lane that are instrumental from the driver making the call to say, hey, this engineer, I think we should bring him in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And some of it will be from past relationships, or because now that is the kingpin, and maybe the engineer's like, I'd really like to go and work in that winning organisation.
Yeah.
So I think it gets overlooked, but it's more powerful than what people understand and see.
Yeah, no, you're right. I as a bystander, looked at it as the team helping the driver to achieve greatness or whatever it may. But it seems to be, from what you're saying, it's the opposite here. The driver, mentally, physically, whatever it might be, he has a massive influence on the team, and they're, and them helping him.
I think reality is that there is. I'm not taking anything away from the team. You're only as good as the people around you.
Yeah.
But that does work the reverse of, we're only as good as the person sitting inside the cockpit and delivering on their side.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is that delivery is not just about going around in circles. It's also outside the car.
Yeah.
And as I say, that's the differential. That's where that 1% club comes in. Your Sennas, your Prosts, your Mansells, You know, all of these guys, Alonso's, Schumacher's, Vettel, they've got something a little bit extra.
Mm-hmm. In your racing career, you know, F1, Indy, Le Mans, what do you think your greatest achievement was?
Oh, I don't know. It's kind of difficult because there's sort of little pockets of success that you have, and I wouldn't put one at the top. I kind of, because there's sort of different disciplines. Winning Le Mans, winning the 24 Hours of Le Mans, fantastic. I think all drivers would love to have that on the CV.
Yeah.
So it's a nice one. You know, if you talk to anybody down the high street, motor racing, most of them have heard of Monaco Grand Prix, Le Mans 24 Hour, or the Indianapolis 500. So they're the big ones. Winning an IndyCar on a street course, a road course, and a 500-mile oval event. I think when I'd done my 500-mile win, I was like the fourth British or English driver at that stage to win a 500-mile race. So they're all achievements in their own rights. For me personally, first World Championship point in Formula One, because of the car that I was driving and the performance of it, almost looked unachievable, but we scored one, and it was a big thing. Early career wins, like in winning more races than any other British or Commonwealth driver in my first year of the sport. Yeah, great. And those things actually are bigger memories than the big successes.
I can imagine.
Because you know what you did and know what it took to earn them and get there. So, yeah.
What do you think was your main motivator? What, pardon the pun here, what drove you on to succeed? Because we're talking elite, you know, the top end of your profession.
It's an interesting question.
And did it change over time?
So I'll give you the. So firstly, I don't have any formal education in terms of classification results. I haven't got one exam to my name. I was never the academic kid.
Right.
I was the kid who would get stuck in and, like, you know, the metalwork class and woodwork, and I would do that side and enjoy it. I actually hated school. I rebelled against it. I didn't like the discipline side of it.
Right.
So the sports side of me, when I got into motorsport, was a channel that I could sort of express myself. And with that came a drive and determination to actually almost reflect back and go, like, I'm going to prove you wrong. You know, the teachers at the school that said you'll never make anything yourself,
I'm going to show you.
I'm going to show you. And that was kind of a key sort of...
Yeah.
And with that, also the commerciality and the business aspect of it also struck a chord. I quite like that. The piecing all of it together, and so it's always sort of sat in the background. But ultimately, I think it was like man and machine. It's like, you know, it's me, race car, one lap on track. Can I go beyond the envelope and back? You know, and that's the other aspect of it that is the key driver. It's like, you know, can you take this thing to the utmost limitations, even go beyond them, and then bring it back? That's the thrill.
Do you think it's, again, me looking at it as an outsider, it's like there's individual duels. It's you, the driver, up against 20 other drivers, whatever it might be, and it's individual duels, individual battles. Is that what it's like, or is it an internal thing? Who are you up against? Who are you fighting against?
It's both, because actually it's all of the drivers will be geared up to compete against themselves in terms of extracting the maximum.
Right.
And then they're also geared up to, like, compete against a teammate, especially in Formula One, because excuse me, F1 is, you know, normally, and always has been for many years, is two cars of the same manufacturer. So the reference is your teammate. So, you know, Blundell, I mentioned earlier, is like 2 years running we were teammates. And, you know, our qualifying race results was probably like 50-50.
Right.
So it was a massive competitive element between us.
Yeah.
So you're always trying to look over your shoulder to the other side of the garage. Am I in front of my teammate? Because to the outside world, that's the only reference. Same car, same kit, same equipment. Right, okay, is he better, is he worse? You know, is she better, is she worse? That's the comparison. And then you've got the Grand Prix itself. So yes, you're right. You've got the other, today's world, 19 other guys and girls around you that are competing for the honours. But first and foremost, it's like, number one is against yourself, number two is against your teammate, and then thirdly, it's like, the actual race. But the pressure starts from the moment you get in the cockpit of a race car. Yeah.
Does it not lead to, just in mentioning that, to huge insecurities as a driver, because you're competing internally, you're fighting internally, and you're competing against the other drivers and the other teams?
I think there's a huge amount of self-doubt that creeps in.
Yeah.
I think there's a huge amount of not knowing whether you've done your preparation right, not knowing whether you put the work in outside the car, not knowing whether you're actually getting the treatment that you deserve inside the team. Right. And sometimes those politics would flow into the system. I know in my career, without a shadow of a doubt, at times I never had the same engine, for example, as my teammate. So I was like 25 horsepower down. But I can't say anything about it because I'm under contract and I can't tell the world that actually there's a reason why I'm 2 tenths slower. I don't have 25 horsepower more.
Right.
Yeah. That's just the politics of it. At that point, that's a number one and number two driver status, and you're on the back end of it. So a lot of these
mentally
things,
there, you're having to overcome that right from the
you're actually questioning yourself on several different levels, but you're also building confidence at the same time. It sounds a little bit of a strange kind of but it's you come out the other end feeling stronger for it because you've had these experiences. But it's not how can I say? It's not a pleasant environment. There's great times, but there's also several times where it's like, this is a grind.
It must be like a dog-eat-dog situation. No one's your friend, really, is it?
Well, I mean, Formula One is called like, the Piranha Club.
Yeah, I can imagine.
People do refer to it as that, and it is a little bit like that, and it's sort of like you get a little bit hardened by it, and you get a bit sort of it's almost like it's one thing getting there, it's another thing staying there. And that's the problem that you run up against. And at this stage, you're sort of, and now I've got a bit of body armour on, and I've had this experience. I can see where the grenades come in. I can see where the knife's coming in. So, dodge. Wow. Yeah. But I think it's probably changed a little bit. And I say that because I think if you look at careers now, a lot of the drivers are very fortunate that they go on to sort of have a 5-6 year career path with one team. Whereas my generation, because there was so many of us as well, it was quite easy to see guys only getting 1 or 2 years. I mean, to sign a 2-year contract and back in the days that we did what we did was a huge thing.
Right.
Okay. Huge thing. Right. Now you get guys signing 4 or 5 year agreements. It's like, oh wow, but it's not.
Yeah. I mean, if I take you away now from the driving side of it. At the end of your career, you kind of transitioned into TV presenting. Can you tell us how that came about?
It kind of came organically, to be honest with you, because I was actually in America doing IndyCar, and the opportunity came up to not replace, but stand in for my good friend Martin Blundell, because he was doing television at that point already. And I got asked whether I would do it, and actually I was commentating with Murray Walker.
Okay.
So, lovely thing to do, and Murray was an incredible guy. And I started by just doing a couple of sort of ad hoc appearances, and then I stepped away from IndyCar and had to make some big decisions. So, do I carry on driving, or do I do this other opportunity that's presented itself in the world of media? And I thought, actually, you know what? Maybe I'd quite like to go and do that now. And I did it for 7.5 years.
Right.
So I did ITV F1 for 7.5 years.
How did you find it being in the other side of the camera, as it were?
I found it tough.
Yeah. Why?
Because I'm not that kind of educated guy, so my vocabulary is quite limited.
Right. Okay.
I'm dyslexic as well, so also my brain functions slightly different.
Right.
And some things are whirring around up there, but actually might not get expressed in the right order.
Right.
So it was a challenge, and also I was a little bit, and probably for me, a lot less confident and a lot more insecure in that role
Right.
than what I ever was with the wheel of a racing car in front of me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I did find it difficult. It was a lot of fun. Never really ticked the box of being the same or a replacement for doing motorsport.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, live TV it's quite intense.
I can imagine.
Problem is, when you deliver something, it's gone. There's no bringing it back. So, it's kind of cool that, working with Murray and all the Murrayisms, as they were called, or, muddly talker.
Yeah.
In some ways, I kind of got a little bit into that myself. And
Yeah. But I suppose, though, you could bring the trackside view. You've been in you've been at the coalface, as it were.
Yeah.
So you can bring that to the viewer, to the listener.
I think also for me, I was probably one of the guys that, it'd be that conversation sitting in the back of a London cab.
Yeah.
With the driver and me in the back, like, it's a little bit like down the pub.
Right.
Yeah. And that's the way that I always tried to do it, because that's what I understood.
Yeah.
So, if it was going to be a little bit more technical and a bit more fluid, and that was somebody else's role.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But for me, I was just going to tell it how I saw it and tell it how it is. And that's what I did. And I did it for 7.5 years. Obviously things changed, but it's a lot of fun. Is
there anything you kind of took away from that experience? I mean, from on the camera side of it, good and bad.
I think it's good to have, experience on both sides of the fence, and I also understood and respected also all those years of doing the driving and having presenters and people interview you.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is there's a big job on the other side of it that you didn't quite comprehend or give the time and respect to actually understand. And of course, then when you turn over and go into that role, so I learned from that side. Mm-hmm. And it gives you a lot of bandwidth. I don't confess to know a lot about much, but what I try and always do is when I go into something, absorb as much as I can and learn from it and see whether I can actually use that in other areas. And, the media side definitely helps where I sit today running our little sports agency, because it gives me a much bigger picture on what goes on and even how the media think. And although that's changed somewhat, social media driven to where we are today, it is quite an interesting sort of aspect of the business.
Talking about your sports agency now, can you give us a little bit of background about that and how it came about and your driver, your motivation for that?
That also stems from the originality of myself and Martin Blundell,
right,
sitting on the board of directors of the British Racing Drivers Club.
He seems to have had an impact on you.
Yeah, we're very close. We're good buddies.
Yeah.
And actually, the concept was, right, we sit on this club where we now give funding to young drivers to help them in their careers, and we're looking at it and going, we've given them this budget, but it's not been spent very wisely. So we looked at each other and said, basically, why don't we go and manage the drivers and support them and give them some of our experience and access to network and try and support them through their careers. And that's really where it started. So myself and Martin sort of did that side of things. Martin's TV career was growing and growing and growing. Again, probably between me and him, the big differential is that I'm a little bit more gung-ho.
Right.
He's a bit more conservative.
Right.
So I'm like, come on.
It's a bit kind of yin and yang.
Yeah, and it works. But at the same time, he's like, Marty, come on, let's have a look down this pathway and let's try and do this and that. It's like, oh, hang on a minute. So we got to a stage where I bought Martin out, and then I wanted to look into other areas of sport. And then fast track through that, I sort of sat there and like, okay, I want to try and do something a bit bigger and have a little bit more depth to it. And I wanted to do something with like-minded people. And I then went into the marketplace and started to look at a few investment proposals and presenting. And I actually ended up having my friend, but is also my chairman today, as a stakeholder in our business,
Okay.
a guy called Theo Pafitis, who people may know very well from Dragon's Den.
Oh, right. Okay.
I didn't have to do a Dragon's Den pitch, so I was quite happy about that. But Theo's a chairman and a stakeholder. Ian Childs, who's also a partner of Theo's on many other businesses, is part of our agency. And Robin Fennick, who's also in the world of motorsport, is inside with us as well. And it was a little bit of a challenge in me not understanding completely the world of commerce, because I've been going around in circles for a long time. But for me, every day's a school day. So as I said to you, I'm always trying to learn. So, it's been a great experience. We're 13 years in now, with MB Partners, which is what the business is called now, Mark Blundell Partners. So it's my name over the door, so I've got to be a little bit sort of precious about it to make sure that we don't tarnish that name. But at the same time, it's been great, because it's been growth year on year, and it's been interesting to sort of develop the agency. The core of it is sport, the core of it is managing driving talent, but at the same time we've now gone into many other different areas, and that's quite an exciting challenge as well.
I mean, talking about the driver side of it from your sports management company and the experience you have, Mark, at the elite end of racing, is there any advice you could give to drivers just starting out? You were there, you've been there.
Do you know what? I get asked that question all the time, and my easy answer is just believe in yourself. It sounds simplistic, I know, but actually it is. When somebody walks through your door and they sit there and they've got self-belief, it radiates. It gets the other person on the other side of the desk to actually sit up and take notice. So if you don't believe in yourself, how do you expect anybody else to believe in you? So I don't go in there and be arrogant. Don't be ignorant of the fact that you've got somebody else's time. Just go in there and make sure that you've got something to say and you've got something to deliver. And actually, you do believe that you can go and do this. You do believe you can get to the very top. Because there's also got to be that emotional connection. For me, sport is full of emotion, and there's going to be a lot more that you can take with you for your journey if you get that emotional connection. And that might start as a little spark, and it may go into something that is a huge friendship. I'm 33 years of relationship with my first original sponsor. I'm still there, still with him. He's a fantastic individual, and then now it goes full circle that he now supports some of our driver clients. So he doesn't support me anymore, but but I'm so thankful that he was one of the guys that did believe in me from the early days and supported me fiscally, and now the whole thing has gone full circle. And that's what sometimes it gets a little bit of a frustration for me, that people don't quite take on board. Emotion counts. It's a key area. Don't just think that presenting something in black and white is just going to be something that's going to walk out the door with a check. It doesn't happen like that. There's got to be more to it. So go do your homework, go do your research, but at the end of it all, believe in yourself.
Fantastic, Mark. Well, I'd just like to thank you for sharing or giving us a little bit of an insight into your fantastic career in F1, Indy, LeMans, and transitioning from that into TV and now your sports business. It was a pleasure speaking to you today, Mark, and you can find out more about Mark and his sports agency at www.markblundellpartners.com. Mark, thanks very much. It was a pleasure.
My pleasure as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us on Empowerment What's the Score. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to never miss an episode.